In the years after the American Revolution, the United States had no navy. The Continental Navy, which had been created during the war against Britain, was disbanded by 1785 because the new nation could not afford to keep ships and sailors. The country had large debts from the war and no strong central government to raise funds for national defense. Under the Articles of Confederation, each state focused on its own interests, and the federal government had limited power. There was no strong agreement that a standing navy was necessary, especially since Americans feared large military forces could threaten liberty. Most leaders believed that the Atlantic Ocean offered natural protection because its vast distance from Europe and North Africa made it harder for foreign navies or pirate forces to reach American shores easily, and that trade could be protected through diplomacy and treaties rather than military force by negotiating agreements, paying tribute if necessary, and relying on peaceful relations to avoid conflict and ensure safe passage for merchant ships. However, the lack of a navy soon caused serious problems. American merchant ships were vulnerable to threats on the high seas. One of the most dangerous threats came from the Barbary pirates. These were privateers and raiders operating from the North African coast, mainly from the ports of Algiers, Tripoli, and Tunis. These regions were part of the Barbary states, which were nominally under the control of the Ottoman Empire but operated independently. The pirates captured ships, took their cargo, and held crews for ransom. European nations usually avoided such problems by paying regular tribute to the Barbary rulers in exchange for safe passage. Before independence, American ships had been protected by British agreements with the Barbary states. But after independence, American ships no longer had that protection. In 1785, two American merchant ships, the Maria and the Dauphin, were seized by Algerian pirates in the Mediterranean Sea. The crews were held as prisoners, and the Dey of Algiers demanded ransom for their release. The U.S. government tried to negotiate for years and eventually paid large sums of money for the release of the captives. But this solution only encouraged more attacks. By the early 1790s, over a dozen American ships had been taken, and more than 100 sailors were being held as prisoners. At the same time, American trade in the Atlantic and the Caribbean was threatened by pirates from other areas as well as privateers during the wars between Britain and France. These events made it clear that relying on diplomacy alone was not enough to protect American commerce. The situation reached a turning point in 1793 when 11 American ships were captured by Algerian pirates in a single year. This created a sense of crisis in the United States. The losses were too costly to ignore. Merchants, shipping companies, and political leaders began to demand a stronger national response. President George Washington and Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson had already recognized the need for some naval protection, but there had been political disagreement in Congress about the cost and necessity of building a navy. Some representatives feared that a navy would lead to more conflict with foreign powers or give too much power to the central government. Others believed that the United States needed a navy to protect trade and keep the country's honor. In 1794, Congress passed the Naval Act. This law authorized the construction of 6 frigates, which were warships designed to be fast and heavily armed. These ships were meant to protect American merchant ships and challenge pirate forces. The act also allowed the president to halt construction if peace was reached with the Barbary states. The 6 ships became the foundation of the new U.S. Navy. They included the USS Constitution, USS United States, USS Constellation, USS Congress, USS Chesapeake, and USS President. Construction took place in shipyards located in different parts of the country to ensure regional support and avoid political opposition. These ships were built with high-quality materials and advanced designs, making them some of the strongest warships of their time. The building process took several years, and diplomatic negotiations continued in the meantime. In 1796, the United States signed a treaty with Algiers that included a large payment of tribute and ransom in exchange for the release of American captives. But by the late 1790s, the conflict with France, known as the Quasi-War, increased the urgency of naval readiness. American ships were being attacked by French privateers in the Caribbean, and the new navy was called into action to defend American trade. The newly built frigates proved successful in this effort, and public opinion began to support a permanent naval force. Although the immediate reason for creating the Navy had been the need to protect ships from Barbary pirates, the new U.S. Navy also played a key role in broader national defense. It helped the United States assert its independence, defend its economic interests, and participate in international affairs. By the early 1800s, the Navy was involved in the First Barbary War, where American forces directly fought against Tripoli to end the payment of tribute. This marked a shift in American foreign policy toward active defense rather than passive negotiation. The success of the U.S. Navy in that conflict helped establish its role as a permanent part of the federal government and an essential part of protecting the country's maritime interests. Subscribe to explore more of America's history.